The funeral, as I understand it, is being held right now. The mother, the daughter, the 11-year-old daughter, they're grieving. Their 26-year-old sister has not been afforded the chance to attend that. If you were Premier, would you have intervened?
Well, thank you, Kieran. Yes, I would have, without a shadow of a doubt. This is a really, really sad day for Queensland, but it is such a sad day for Sarah and her family, who are in the depth of their grief. And look, what I want to say about this matter is I'm disgusted when I heard back again. I mean, I sat there in the chamber today and lived what the Premier spoke about, and I'm disgusted. Look, Kieran, at the end of the day, we're talking about a 26-year-old Queenslander who went down to Canberra only several months ago to take a job up in Hungry Jack's, to manage a Hungry Jack's. And as you rightfully have said, Canberra, or the PM said, Canberra has not had a case for over 60 days. It has taken the bungled health system here in Queensland to get her an exemption. She's stuck in a hotel room. Sarah did not get to see her father before he passed. This is a bloody tragic day, and I, for one, am just so sad for the family. I'm sad for Isabel, Sarah's little sister, who is 11.
Yeah.
And look, it's just not good enough. Kieran, we need compassion, we need consistency, and we need common sense. And unfortunately, the Premier of Queensland has shown us today that she has none of those things.
Well, that 11-year-old, you think about the situation she's in as we speak this afternoon, and not having her big sister there, it's heartbreaking.
Well, look, it really is heartbreaking, and I spoke to Sarah this morning, and I can tell you, all she wanted to do, she doesn't want all the media, she doesn't want all of this. This is her day with her dad, her mum and her little sister, and that's all she wanted to do. So the PM's right. The Premier of Queensland could have and should have made this decision. The buck stops with the Premier. The Premier was elected to this state to lead, and lead is what she should have done today, and she has failed. Now, I cannot believe that the Premier of this state reverted to saying that the PM was bullying her. What a load of rot. And I would say this to the Premier. Seriously, that is not bullying. What he was doing was appealing to your compassion, and yet the Premier of Queensland has shown that she's buck-passing. Now, this is a really sad day for Sarah. The funeral's on right now. At the last minute, Queensland Health, not the Premier, but Queensland Health came out and said that Sarah would be able to have a private viewing of her father on his funeral day. What Sarah wanted to do was be able to hug her sister and hug her mum. They wanted to be able to be together. And Kieran, please, I hope your listeners realise this. Sarah is not an AFL footy star. She's not Tom Hanks. She's not a movie star. She's just an everyday Queenslander who moved to Canberra for work. She's 26. She's just a great young girl, and this is just probably will go down in her little history as just the saddest day of her life, because she was not able to be with her dad.
And as you said, it took way too long to get. Well, the exemption took more than 20 days, and tragically, her dad died in that time, so she was unable to say goodbye. So that's the first episode in this debacle of a situation, and then she's not afforded the right to join her mother and her sister. Even if you put in the best COVID practices in the world, where would you say it's not appropriate for a kid from a jurisdiction where there are no cases and haven't been for 2 months to attend their dad's funeral? It does defy logic.
Well, Kieran, it just doesn't make sense. And here we have Sarah, who actually did the right thing. So 23 days ago, Sarah applied for an exemption to come into Queensland. Now, that process was completely bungled. It took 20 days. So on Friday of last week, Sarah entered into the hotel quarantine here in Queensland. Now, another bungle that has actually happened to this poor girl, she actually wrote to the exemption people and said, look, in fact, she wrote to the Premier, and in the email to the Premier, she wrote, how her father had now very tragically passed. He had died. And so therefore, could she change her application from just getting into the state to being able to go to his funeral? That's not a big ask, you know. In this world of pain that we're in, it is not a big ask for Sarah to do that. So she's had bungles from the beginning. She wrote a letter to the Premier on Tuesday of this week, of which I tabled in the Queensland Parliament this morning. It was very blunt, and now Sarah tells me this morning she still hasn't even had a response from the Premier's department or the Premier's office in relation to that email. And look, I just don't think it's good enough.
What's your position more broadly on the borders? Because you look at New South Wales, they're keeping it well and truly under control. You know, touch wood, we hope that continues to be the case, but certainly single-digit cases. The Prime Minister just wants, through the National Cabinet, this agreement on the hotspots. Do you think that the Premier needs to move more quickly in terms of getting that cross-border travel happening? Because obviously the tourism industry, which is massive in your state, has been absolutely hammered by the border closures.
Yeah, look, without a doubt, Kieran. So there's a couple of things here. The health and well-being of Queenslanders is, of course, vitally important. That is the number one issue. And we need to make sure we've got strong controls. However, we need compassion, consistency and common sense. I'm with the Prime Minister that we do need to make sure that when we're defining hotspots, that there is a nationally consistent approach. I'm with the Prime Minister when he says we need a nationally consistent approach to crossing borders for emergency, for medical, for agriculture, for aerial. I mean, these are the issues that New South Wales have been handling extremely well. When you come into Queensland and you see the just sheer pig-headedness around some of these issues, we've had boarding school kids who have had to go to town on social media and in the media to get their cases heard, to be able to get home or back into Queensland for school. I mean, you shouldn't have to go this far. And that is why, Kieran, I'm saying we need to look for a national consistent approach. We do need the tough controls, but we also can't set and forget. Now, I would say to you, Kieran, and your listeners today, the Premier has proven today she is being purely political when it comes to the border decisions here in Queensland. There is an election in 51 days' time, and the only people that the Premier is concerned about is herself and getting re-elected. And right now, today, it's about people like Sarah who couldn't actually get to her father's funeral. And Sarah's not alone. There are many, many cases that are coming out of the woodworks, and enough's enough.
Just finally, we've got less than a minute left on our window here, but Kate Jones has just announced she's quitting Parliament. I've just had this handed to me. A shock exit, the third Labor Cabinet Minister this week. What do you, I mean, obviously they're your opponents, but as you witness this ahead of the election, what's your take on that?
Well, look, quite frankly, there is only one party that has a vision and a plan to drag Queensland out of this recession and this hopeless mess that we find ourselves in the state of Queensland, and that's the LNP. So, look, I wish all of the retiring Labor members and ministers well in their retirement, but, you know, look, I don't know what reason they are all choosing to desert the ship, but I will say this, is that the LNP team here in Queensland, we are out on the ground, we're doing everything possible to convince Queensland that we have got the best plan to drag Queensland out of this recession, because we've got to get Queensland working again.
Deb Frecklington, thanks very much. Opposition Leader joining us from Parliament House there in Brisbane.